This is the lecture for Chapter 6 on citators. If you want to pull up the PowerPoint, feel free to do so. This lecture is going to cover citators, and it's also going to cover something that is not in the book, which is actually how to read citations, and that will be at the end of the lecture. Okay, so what are citators? Well, they're very important. Okay, the reason that we consult citators is to discover if cases that we're relying on before the judge are still good law. Because when you read a case, it's not going to tell you whether it's been, for example, overruled. They can also help you find other sources of law too. Why is it important? Like I said, it's malpractice not to update our law and make sure it's good before we put it before a judge. It can also be used as kind of a finding tool, because when we have a case, it will, if we shepherdize it, okay, that's what we usually call using a citator, is shepardizing. Okay, now Wes does not have shepherds; they have KeyCite. Lexis has shepherds, but the whole process we call shepardizing. Okay, and so it helps us first of all find out, like I said, if a case is still good law because it hasn't been overruled. But it also helps us in terms of finding cases after our particular case that we're reading has been decided. Okay, so what it does is, what Shepherds does and what KeyCite does is when we enter or we look for the particular citation of the case we're talking about, it will give us a list of all the cases that have discussed the particular case that we're reading. And we can use that to find more recent cases than the one we're looking at currently. Okay, so on Westlaw, there's a citating tool called KeyCite. Okay, in Lexis, we use Shepard Citation. Okay, now Shepard started out as a book version, and using the print volume is a total pain in the ass, because you have to look through 3 or 4 different volumes of the book to find all of the cases that you have to. Okay, so nobody today actually uses the print version of Shepard's. In fact, the most common reason attorneys like me subscribe to Lexis or Westlaw is so we don't have to shepardize. Okay, what used to take us, 10 minutes now takes us 10 seconds. And that's why it's such an important tool. If we're using the book volume of Shepard's, there's generally 3 main volumes. Okay, there's one that's the United States citations, and that has all of the Supreme Court reports. Okay, then there's the federal citation that has all of the United States courts, such as the district courts and the courts of appeals. And then they have regional citations. For some states, if they're smaller states, they'll just cover a whole particular area covered by a reporter. So if you're in the Midwest, it might cover several states. California, we have our own particular version of Shepard specific to California law and cases. Okay, so what's the shepardization procedure? First, you got to find the correct volume. For example, if we're looking in California, I would look at Shepard's California citations. Okay, then we have to find the particular volume that our case is listed under. Generally, they're listed chronologically. And then we have to check each particular volume identified. Okay, now the problem with, like I said, using the books is there's a main volume, it's red, and then they have an update for the last year, and then they have an update for the last 6 months, and then they have one for the last 3 months. And you have to look at each one. Okay, so doing it on the computer is much easier. Now, if you're online, there's a Shepard's online if you use Lexis. If you're in Westlaw, online you use KeyCite. Okay, and it's much easier. You literally just type in the citation of the case, and it just automatically pulls up every case that that has ever been decided. After that, has mentioned the particular case that you've typed in. So, like I said, much easier. Next week or the week after, I'm going to give you a little tour of Westlaw, and I will show you how KeyCite works. So if you didn't get it from the book, we'll get it next week or the week after. Now, one of the benefits of using something like Keysight as opposed to the law, the book itself, is it'll tell you right away whether the case is still good. Okay, and in Keysight they do this by flags. Like a red flag means it's been overruled for at least one point of law. Yellow flag means it's been criticized in some cases, and green basically means go. Okay, so when we look, we'll get into this next week. But if you see a H or a C up in the corner, it also means it's good. Okay, one of the nice things about Keysight 2 is you can do it for statutes. So let's say you're looking at a particular section of the penal code. You can Keysight that, and it will pull up all the cases that talk about that particular section of whatever code that you're looking at as well. Okay, that's it for the citation part. Like I said, in a week or two, I'm going to give you a whole tour of Westlaw, and I'll have a lecture in more detail in that regard. Now I want to move on to actual how to read citations. Okay, I gave you a handout, a couple of handouts on that, so I would definitely pull that up and follow along as I go through it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to teach you how to do is how to read cases. Okay, now when you see cases in California, the official reporter is not published by West. The official reporter is Bancroft Whitney, which is owned by Lexis. Okay, so when you see California cases, a lot of times there'll be different citations. Okay, now if we're talking about the California Supreme Court, the California Supreme Court, the initials that you're looking at the official version, the official reporter is Cal, C-A-L. Okay, so if you're looking at the unofficial, which is West, it's going to be the California Reporter. Okay, there's also what we call a regional regional casebook, or yeah, I guess you'd call it casebook, and that's the Pacific Reporter. Okay, and that covers cases from all over the West Coast. So if you're looking for Oregon or Washington or Hawaii, Alaska, places like that, you'll find them in the Pacific Reporter. Okay, so if you look at page 2 of the handout, you'll see an example of citations to Supreme Court cases. Okay, we'll always start with the names of the parties. Okay, now it says in the handout it'll always start with the plaintiff and the defendant. Okay, that's not always true, and sometimes in federal court, the party that looks like the plaintiff will actually be the person appealing, so they'll switch the names if it's actually the defendant appealing. But for our purposes, you don't have to worry about that right now. Okay, so you look there, the name of the parties, Marvin versus Marvin. Okay, now when we do a citation, when we put the name of the case before the court, we always do that in italics. So it'll be Marvin v. Marvin in italics. And then in California, we always put the year next, okay? And I'll show you how this works a little bit later, and that's in parentheses. And then after that will come a number. Okay, if you look on page 2 of the handout, it says 18. Okay, that means volume 18. Well, volume 18 of what? Okay, well, I look at the next part of the citation, and it's CAL period 3D. That's Cal 3rd. Since it's Cal, I know it's the California Supreme Court. Now, the 3rd means it's the 3rd volume. Okay, currently we're in the 4th volume of the California reports, and so you'd have to, don't get confused and go to like 18 Cal 2nd or 18 Cal 1st. I doubt if you go to Cal 1st because it's so old. It just says Cal, C-A-L period. But quite often you'll have to go to Cal 4th, which contains more recent cases. Okay, then after that, so I know I'm looking at I have to go to volume 18, and on the side of the book it'll say 18, and the California reports 3rd, And then where I need to look in that particular volume is page 660. And that is the page that the case begins on. Okay, now this is really important. Like I do legal research every day for the court. And so when I need to look at a case, boom, 18 Cal 3rd. And I can go right to page 660 after I pull it off the shelf and look at it. Or I can just type it in on Westlaw Online and find it. Okay, now look at the parallel citations there. Okay, they're completely different. Okay, this same case, if I was in the Pacific Reporter, could be found at volume 557 of the Pacific Reporter Second. That's P period 2D, beginning on page 106. Okay, now if I was looking at the Westlaw version of the California reports, I would go to page 134, Cal Reporter. Okay, so Cal is the official reporter, but Cal Reporter is the West version. Okay, so 134 Cal Reporter 815. Okay, that is the I'd find the exact same case, Marvin versus Marvin, which is actually a very famous case, has to do with palimony, right there in volume 134. Okay, now you see at the end it says parentheses 1976 in parentheses. Okay, now that's the year of the opinion. In California, when we cite something before the court, that actually goes before that 18 there. Okay, so if I was reading this in a book, and I'll give you an example of this later when we get on Westlaw, and I'll show you how Westlaw works. I would cite Marvin v. Marvin, parentheses 1976, in parentheses 18, Cal period, 3D, 660. Okay, so that's the Supreme Court reports. Okay, if you look down at the bottom of the page, there's a case, Daniels versus Wiggum. Okay, that's in 194 Cal App Second. Okay, what does the app mean? Well, it means the appellate reports. Okay, there's a different set of reporters for the California appellate reports than the California Supreme Court. So when you see that APP there in the middle before 2D, you know you're dealing with an appellate case. Okay. And so parallel citation 15 Cal Reporter 57, that's for the Westlaw version, which you really don't have to worry about. Even if you're in Westlaw, you actually don't have to use that. But why would you use parallel citations? Well, the main reason to do so is when you're citing a case that is from out of state. So if I was like citing an Oregon case, I would cite the official Oregon Reporter, but I'd also have a parallel citation to the Pacific Reporter, because a lot of law libraries don't have access to the Oregon Reporters here in California. We don't have them at the Kern County Law Library, but we do have access to the Pacific Reporters. Okay, parallel citations were much more important before most people went to online legal research and access, because it gave the court or the judge a way to go pull that off the shelf. Nowadays, they all have access to online materials, and so it would be much easier to find an Oregon case than having to go pull the Pacific Reporter off the shelf. Okay, that's it for page 2. Okay, go to page 3, and down at the bottom it says 4-3. And this is how a citation to the Supreme Court of the United States would look. Okay. Roe versus Wade, very famous case. 410 U.S. Okay, now the official volume of the Supreme Court is titled U.S. Page 133, or 113, I'm sorry. But there are also two unofficial volumes of the Supreme Court as well. Okay, there's the Supreme Court Reporters, and then there's the Lawyer's Edition. So there are the parallel citations there for you as well. Okay, so the official version is the United States Reports, which is U.S. The same case can be found in the Supreme Court Reports, which is that 140 U.S. 113. Exact same case can be found at 93 Supreme Court S period CT period 705, and there's also the Lawyer's Edition as well, 35 L period ED period second 147. Okay, so for the Supreme Court, there's three different reporters. Okay, now why is that? Because the official Supreme Court reports usually takes it about a year for it to get into actually a bound volume, and so that's why these other ones, these unofficial reporters, like the U.S. Supreme Court reports and the Lawyer's Edition, generally have the cases up with the correct citations to their reporters quicker. Okay, on to page 4, which has to do with statutes or codes. Okay, each and every particular code in California is cited by its name, whether it's the labor code or the civil code or the code of civil procedure. And each particular code has a particular abbreviation for it. Okay, for example, the revenue and taxation code is REV period and TAX.code. The labor code is LAB period. Okay, I disagree with the way they actually do the citations. In California, normally when we're citing a particular code section, we don't put the Cal in front of it. Okay, so when I cite the California Code of Civil Procedure, which I literally do on a daily basis, it's code, CID, CIV, civ, period, procedure, PROC, period, section. Okay, now the Code of Civil Procedure is a little bit different because you put the code before civil procedure. Okay, you'll see a lot of attorneys cite to the Code of Civil Procedure by just using CCP. That is an incorrect citation. It's code, civ, period, pros, PROC, period, and then the section number, the section sign, and the section number. Okay, so don't fall into that lazy trap of just putting CCP like a lot of attorneys do. Okay, the civil code is code civ, so it's a COD CIV period. So each one has its own initials, and normally when you look in the front of the book you can find it. Okay, the best way to do it, and this is the way I taught myself, is by reading the cases. Okay, when you look at a case, it'll tell you the proper citation. So in California, we cite the particular code or law by the particular code it's under, and there's literally like 50 codes. There's, you know, the like I said, the labor code, the civil code, the code of civil procedure, the revenue and taxation code, the rules of court, you know, welfare and institutions, and they all have particular abbreviations, and you just got to learn them, okay? Or find a citator, like a uniform book of citation. Even then, they might be wrong, okay? But don't worry about that. Now, when we cite to the United States Code, which are the laws of the United States, you do it by the number. Each code, as opposed to California, we do it by the name. With the United States, it's all done by title number. Okay, so if you look down at the bottom of 4.4, it says 18. Okay, that's a particular title of the United States Code. Okay, so 18 USC section 430 or section 543, that is a citation in the United States Code. Okay, there are also unofficial United States codes as well. Okay, there's the United States Code Annotated, which is published by West, and the United States Code Service, which is published by the Lexis group. Okay, and so you can have parallel citations as well. Okay, why do we have parallel citations? Okay, because a lot of times the official code, the USC, it takes a long time for it to actually get in the book and get to the proper code section. The private reporters, such as West and Lexis, they generally get it in their code quicker. Okay, so if you're a little bit confused on that, just shoot me an email or post something and maybe I can explain it a little bit further. Okay. If you're ever worried about proper citation in federal court or in another state other than California, there is a standard guide that will tell you how to do it. and it's called the Blue Book, A Uniform System of Citation. I'm on page 5 of the handout. Okay, this is done by Harvard Law School and Harvard Law Review, and it is like the Bible on how to properly cite things outside of California. Okay, in California, the Bible for citation is the California Style Manual, a handbook for legal style for California courts and lawyers. It's published by West. And like I said, we do things a little bit differently in California in terms of citation. Particularly, we put the date before the actual volume number. I'm not going to get into that in particular. Just understand the citation in California is a little bit different than it is in the rest of the country, because we're a little bit different than everybody else, right? We're California. An important caveat or warning is when you look at secondary sources. If you don't know what secondary sources are, you need to go back to like chapter 3. Okay, so if I'm looking at like the Bible for Civil Procedure in California, which is the Rudder Group Guide to Civil Procedure Before Trial, I use it every day. In the Rudder Group, they always have incorrect citations because they're trying to shorten things down to get as much stuff into the volume as they can. So when you're looking at a secondary source, warning, 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 when you're looking at a secondary source, do not assume that in that secondary source that the citation is in correct form. It usually isn't, unless it's like a law review article. Okay, and why? Because they're trying to shorten it to get as much stuff into their volume as they can. For example, in Rudder, the Code of Civil Procedure, they always put CCP. Okay, and when they cite case names, they always shorten them down. So, just be wary. The only place you can find correct style or format for California cases is in the citation manual. Okay, or you can do it the old-fashioned way, which is what I do. I look at cases and I see how things are cited in cases, and I follow that. Okay. The next page, which is 4.6, has a bunch of abbreviations for the law. Okay, if you look there on page 4.6, there's all these particular abbreviations that are commonly used. I show them there so you have an idea or a reference on how things are cited throughout the legal world. But just understand this. If you see a citation like this, don't always assume it's true. Okay. Like I said, California reports, all that. California, we do things differently. But for the, things like CalJur or CCH or the Federal Reporters, okay, these are pretty good guidelines if you're reading some type of material as to what they're referring to. Okay, so if I look down, I'm in, like, say, the middle of page 6, where it says Fed Third. I know that's the Federal Reporter Third series, okay, which are the appellate courts of the federal system. The last handout comes from USC School of Law. USC just kicked Cal's ass this weekend in football, so I'm not real happy about that. Our team is horrible. And they just talk about some particular types of citation manuals. Okay, there's of course the good old Blue Book that they talk about on page 1. And there's also another citation manual out there, which is the ALWD citation manual, and it's just as good as the Blue Book. Okay, and then they talk about the California citation manual at the bottom of that page as well. But what I really want to get is page 2, where they give you examples of the proper format for citations. Okay, if you look at page 2, there's a heading 2-period case citations and abbreviations. Okay, the first example there is a actual good example of how things are cited in federal court. Okay, we start with the case name, Gray versus Campbell Soup. Company. Then 650, that's the volume number. F sup. What that means is the federal supplement. Now I know that that's a district court, which is actually a trial court. It's pretty rare to have trial court opinions, but in this case we do. Okay, then there's a parentheses CD. That tells me what C period D period Cal. That lets me know it's the Central District of California, which is down in Los Angeles. 1986 in parentheses. Okay, so that lets me know that this was a case decided in the Central District of California in 1986, and if I want to look at it, I go to the Federal Supplement, volume 650, and it begins on page 1166. Okay. The next example, Barrows versus Jackson, gives an example of how parallel citations are used. Okay. After Barrows versus Jackson, it's 346 U.S. 249. Okay, that means that's the official reporter, the Supreme Court, official Supreme Court reporter. And then there are parallel citations. 73 Supreme Court 1031 and 97 Lawyers Edition 1536, 1953. Okay, as you see in the federal system, the date goes after the citation. Why would we list all three? Because we don't know if, like, we're in a California state court and we're citing that, which volume or which reporter volume the local library would carry. Okay. Now, the next one, Jones versus Kelly. Warning, you see 208 Cal 251. Okay, that's a very early case in the California Supreme Court. And then the parallel citation of the Pacific Reporter, 280 Pacific 942. And then you see the date afterwards. Okay, if we're citing this case in federal court, that's a correct citation. If we're citing this case in California, that 1929 goes before that 208 Cal 251. Okay, so a little bit tricky in between state and federal court. Next example, Universal Pictures Company versus Harold Lloyd Court. Okay, this is just to show you how to cite things in the federal appeals courts. Okay, so this is 162 Fed Second. That's the federal reporter, which lets me know it's a appellate court. And then we have 354, which is the page it begins on. And then in parentheses, 9th Circ. That lets me know it's the 9th Circuit, which is up in San Francisco. And it was cited in 1947. Okay, the 9th Circuit. This would be a proper citation in federal court to a 9th Circuit case. In California, all you actually have to do is flip that 1947 in front and get rid of the 9th Circuit. But that's a little bit of a nuance that you don't have to worry about right now. Okay, last one, typical appellate court California case. Harris versus Atlantic Richfield Company, 14 Cal App 4th. That lets me know it's in volume 14 of the California Appellate Reports, beginning on page 70. There's the parallel citation to the California Reporter, which is the West version of the California cases. Then 1993. Okay, as I've said before, and if we were citing that for a California court, the 1993 would go in front of the citation and immediately after the case name. The bottom of page 2 and all of page 3 just gives you citations to the various reporters. It's a really good reference thing. It has the federal reporter citations, the Supreme Court, the federal rules of decisions, which are administrative agencies of the federal court system, has the California reporters, and then it also has the regional reporters. The one you'd be concerned with here is the Pacific Reporter down there at the middle of the page. And then the rest of this just has something I've already gone over, which is proper citation to the United States Code and the California Civil Code, as you can see there on page 4 here, Cal period Civ Code section 1410. Okay, if in federal court you need that Cal in front of civil code. In California you don't. You just need Civ Code. And then it has some abbreviations for commonly used secondary sources like CalJur and AmJur and things like that. Okay, the last part of this handout has to shows you the proper citation in California. Okay, look at the cases. Herding versus Smith. You see the date in front of the citation. The second one shows you parallel citations and with the citation of the California Reporter in brackets. Okay, I've seen it done in brackets. I've also seen it just done separated by a semicolon. I really wouldn't worry about that. Look at the third one though. Okay, you see that this is a case DC, that means district court. Circuit, which means this came from the District of Columbia. They have their own appellate court there in 1982. Okay, so what I said was a little bit earlier was wrong in terms of you have to put the court. Okay, DC, that lets me know this is from the Circuit Court of the District of Columbia. Okay, and the last one just shows you how to cite to a particular page. Okay, so when we cite to a case, let's say 150 Cal App 3rd, I'm looking at in Remarriage of King, 304, and then if I'm referring to a particular page, which I always do, that lets me know that whatever I've quoted in my particular brief before the court begins at page 306, and et suique means 306, you know, then on. So 306, 307, 308, 309, whatever. Okay, so when we cite to a case, not only do we cite to the page that the case begins on, but also the page in which the material that we're citing is found within that case. Okay, so this Marriage of King case begins on 304, but whatever I've quoted from that case begins on page 306. Okay, that's really important for guys like me that are legal research attorneys, because then I can go quickly to the case and go right to the particular page that I need to look at that you're citing. The next thing you need to know about citation in California is normally when we cite a case, there's some nuances to this, but the general rule is we cite it at the end of the sentence. So this is the way it goes. Let me think of a good way to put it. Okay, just say the end of the sentence, period. And then we go parentheses, the citation to the case, period, and parentheses on to the next sentence. Okay, if you're not real clear about that, just pull up any California case and look at the way cases are cited. Okay, you can cite actually within the sentence by putting the name of the case and the citation in the sentence. It's a little more tricky, but if you read any California case, I invite you to pull one up and you'll see that the citation is generally at the end of the case after the end of the sentence. So period, parentheses, name of case, citation, period, in parentheses. Okay. Same thing with sections to statutes. Okay, you can see some of the nuances there on page 1 of this particular handout. Okay, if I was actually just look at the ones like the Government Code and the Probate Code. Okay, those are all good examples of proper citations in California to codes.